All right.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Beyond Chronic Disease. My name is Wendy Gathercole and I'm your host for the show. And today I have the beautiful Elissa Ray. Elissa is a naturopath. Hi, Elissa.
Hi.
How are you going?
Good. How are you?
Good. And the viewers and the listeners are going to say, congratulations, Elissa, because she's expecting twins.
Yeah.
So I'll let everybody know who Elissa Ray is. She's the founder of Compleat Vitality, Compleat spelled Compleat, and is a qualified naturopath nutritionist. She's a mum of a sassy 3-year-old, and here we go, soon to be mum of twins. Elissa Ray has been working in the natural health industry for over 15 years and became a naturopath due to her own health struggles with chronic IBS and anxiety. She now spends her days helping others overcome their own gut and health issues. And I love that because I'm not sure if you remember, Elissa, but I was diagnosed with Crohn's many years ago. And I had anxiety, panic attacks, well, you name it. So I got over that after a long period of learning, researching all, lots of different modalities and so forth. But here you are, I met you, and here you are, a naturopath, and you had IBS and anxiety too. So tell us all about that, if you don't mind.
So my whole sort of life I had I was always a sick kid. So I was just always chronically sick with all different things. Probably at my worst was back when I was a swimmer, and I had chronic ear infections and ended up having to quit swimming as a result of that because I became antibiotic resistant. So that was kind of the first big effect on my gut and the microbiome. And then after that, I was constantly getting chest infections and bronchitis and all sorts of things. And then I became antibiotic resistant a second time, where my body was just immune to them. They didn't help me anymore. Then in 2011, I was a pretty big year for me. No, sorry, 2012. 2012 was a big year for me. I did Tough Mudder and I tore the labrum in my hip. Ooh. And tore my quads and adductors, and then continued because
ouch,
competitive person. And in 2013, I had surgery on my hip. And then 6 weeks later, I tore the labrum again, and was told that they wouldn't operate on me unless it was a hip replacement, and to just have anti-inflammatory drugs, basically. So I then moved overseas 18 weeks post-hip surgery. And I pretty much spent 12 to 18 months basically living on Nurofen Plus, Panadeine Forte, and Loxcam, which just completely destroyed my gut lining. So by the time I came back from Europe, I had very chronic diarrhea. I'd move my bowels 20 or more times a day. In the morning was definitely worse. I reckon in the morning from waking until probably 10 a.m., I would move them at least 10 to 15 times. It was insane. And then the anxiety that's associated with that is huge, right? Like I had massive anxiety with driving and public transport, especially. So when I was over in London, I got stuck on a bus for an hour and a half, and we had only moved like 100 meters, and the bus driver wouldn't let us off. And I had 2 panic attacks on that bus. And I remember after that, my gut got worse again. And so every time I went on public transport, I would get anxious and I would feel like I would need to go to the bathroom. And then, so when I came back to Townsville, I remember we only lived 15 minutes from work. Sorry, Wendy, you've just froze. Oh, there you are. We only lived 15 minutes from work, but I would take the route that had the most toilet stops. And if I got stuck at a set of lights and the toilet was on the other side, I would start feeling anxious, like, and my stomach would start contracting and cramping, like I was going to just have to go. And I would start stressing and freaking out. And then, like, I would get to work at about 7:45 and start at 8 o'clock. And I remember in that 15 minutes, every single morning, I would probably run to the toilet about 3 or 4 times in 15 minutes. Like, it was crazy. And my poor now husband, who was amazing through it all, I remember there was some days where I would come out of the bathroom and I would just be bawling my eyes out. And he'd be like, "What's the matter?" And I'd be like, "I just did a poo." And I remember he would stop at a health food shop on the way home from work and get me, like, just whatever he could think of. They'd come home with a box full of food and be like, "I just hope you can eat something."
Yeah.
He was such a sweetheart. But we went down the road of, I saw a gastroenterologist up in Townsville for quite a long time. He did a lot of testing on me, and then basically said to me, through Medicare and then some that I have had paid out of pocket as well, he'd done over $10,000 worth of testing and he could find nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, clearly there's something wrong with me because I can't stop pooping, right? And so he prescribed me Lexapro for my anxiety and was like, because I was heading to Japan, so I was stressing a lot about the public transport in Japan because we were going to be catching a lot of trains and everything. And he was like, so basically the Lexapro will be good because it's either going to stop your bowels from moving because the anxiety might be the trigger, or you're still going to have diarrhea, but you're not going to care about it because your brain's kind of thing.
I love that with doctors. Don't you love that with doctors?
Yeah.
I've been told. Yay.
And then he told me that I could take up to 10 diarrhea stops a day. And I said to him, I was like, surely that's not good for my body to take that many. And he was like, oh, there's no scientific evidence to prove that you can't have up to 10 a day. And I was like, but that's just logical. Surely people don't have that many a day. So, and he told me to eat a diet of chicken, fish, and vegetables, and I would be right. And I said, well, that's fine, except that at the time, I couldn't actually digest animal protein at all. And I was basically, my diet that I was living on was, I was having mushed up chicken and vegetable soup at lunchtime at work because I couldn't have it couldn't be chunky soup. But the mushed up soup, I could digest it maybe 50% of the time. And then at dinner time, I was having a plate of quinoa and vegetables. And that's all I ate for the entire day. And I was massaging at the time, and I was massaging like between 6 to 8 hours of clients a day. So I was absolutely exhausted. So yeah, I went on the Lexapro for 1 week and it made me violently ill. I remember I had migraines and intense stomach pains with it. And my now husband was like, I just don't worry about it. Don't take it because there's no point in taking something that's going to make you even sicker.
No, just more of your gut lining.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Destroy more of my gut lining because I had no idea about that at that point. So I went off them and we ended up, and he kept telling me like, just quit work, because work was also a big trigger, like with the anxiety, with massaging, because being stuck in a room for an hour with a client and not being able to use the bathroom, then that obviously was a trigger for the anxiety, which was then a trigger for my bowels to start contracting as well. So I ended up stopping massage, and starting to become a naturopath. So,
right. Awesome.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's just one of those stories that, like you said, you didn't know what the medication was doing to your gut. And that's just and that is why I love having you on this podcast. And my podcast is all about showcasing what can happen, or what we can do for our bodies that doesn't necessarily come out of a pill or from a doctor's office.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and there's so much more to that. Like, I'm listening to your story of anxiety and panic attacks, and it took me back to when I was having panic attacks, when I went to the convention center to a concert, and we're sitting way up high, and the next minute, like, just got up there, sat down. The next minute I start getting really hot, and I'm thinking, I don't know whether I was going to fall down the stairs, like I'm sitting in my seat, whether I was going to pass out and roll down the stairs or what. And I'm sitting there sort of like, and just had to run out of there and get some cold water and so forth. And that's what part of my life was like. I still had, like, I was sort of coming out of the Crohn's to a degree, but still had the anxiety and the panic attacks. And it wasn't just, it was a bit of it was the lifestyle too, because I was getting up running, like not literally running with my 2 feet, but hitting the ground running in the morning. I've got 4 boys and taking them here, there and everywhere. And sometimes, not eating and not drinking enough water, like having a coffee or something like that. And so I had to readjust all of that. But I know I nearly interrupted you when you said all I could eat through the day. It took me back to when I was in my heightened Crohn's state. All I could eat was plain chips and plain chocolate. And I just ate that, like, it was only a couple of days, but everything I ate just made me sick. I had, like, not literally vomiting, but I had chronic pains, and I was on the floor, and I'm like, so but it was just just a lot of self-education, and knowing that, like, the medication I was on, I read a book about it if anyone's interested, Whole Foods, the Facts, it was the stepping stones that I took to get to where I am today. It was the first point of call, like the medication. Well, the doctors, I have great doctors. I'm not going crook about my doctors. They were very understanding. But the medication, it created more symptoms, symptoms that literally made me go, oh my gosh, like that. So, all of those things. So going from one to the next, sort of step, I got to where I am now. So, so how did you, so you stopped the massage, and you went to learn to be a naturopath.
Yeah. So at the time, I also saw a natural therapist up in Townsville, Sam Spina. Swear he saved my life. He does hypnosis. And so we did a lot of hypnosis to get over the anxiety part of it. And then he was the one that sort of guided me to eat more of, like, temporarily, that's kind of more like vegan type diet, but also gluten and dairy free, because gluten's a massive trigger for me still. Dairy actually gives me migraines. And so we worked on nourishing my gut, and then obviously I was studying as well, and it's something that I had planned to study. I had always wanted to be a naturopath, and my first stepping stone to becoming a naturopath was to become a massage therapist, because at the time in Townsville we couldn't study naturopathy. So I became a massage therapist back in 2008, and you couldn't study naturopathy in Townsville back then. There wasn't anything of online learning or anything, So I had to wait for that to sort of catch up, and it just so happened that it caught up just in time for my gut to be at its peak.
Yes.
And so I just bit the bullet and I did it, and it was sort of it was a massive, big, like, milestone at the time too, because that was like when there was the teach out period for the advanced diplomas. So, but also the thought of having to go back and study for another 3 or 4 years, after I also have a business degree as well. So, like,
more study. Just
I finished all my study back in
you finished
2008, 2009, and I'm like, to do it all over again. But it was where my passion was, and I knew that I didn't want to be a massage therapist forever. And I was finding that so many more of my clients were opening up about their own health issues. They could see that I was sick. I was losing so much weight. I was so, like, drawn and gone in the face, and you could start to, like, see my ribs. I started, by the time we actually went to Japan, it was like I had a bobblehead. Like, it was like literally my head was bigger than my body. That's what it felt like. And like, I look back at photos, and I was like a size 8, which my body, because I'm more muscly with having been a swimmer, my body's best is size 10 to 12. And a size 8 is just, I looked so sick, and I was so sick. So I lost my train of thought, but
that's okay. I often do on this show. It's fine.
I forget what your question was, to be fair.
Oh, we were talking about your journey into naturopath, becoming a naturopath.
So that's sort of how I decided to actually get in and do it. But I remember, like, as a kid, my mum would always end up taking me to naturopaths because doctors could never find the answers. So we'd always end up at a naturopath, and then I'd get better, and then I'd end up getting sick again. We'd start with the doctor's journey, and we'd end up with the naturopathy journey. And so it was something that I always wanted to do, but I didn't have the opportunity until, the time came that my body literally, like, forced it on me.
And I think for me, that's like I sort of think that's the universe showing us, paving the way for us, really. I mean, I wouldn't have been doing this unless I had gotten to a point where I was so sick, and then just wanted to share it with the world as well, I guess, Elissa. So and that's just a beautiful thing, that we have to go through the pain so that we can share our stories with others.
Well, the way that I see it, it makes me a better practitioner, because the majority of the clients that I obviously attract are those gut related clients, and which is where I want to work anyway. I want to work with the gut, because that's where my biggest passion is. But being out, like, I'm out in Flagstone, I'm the only naturopath in the area, so I do see a broad range of clients, but the majority of my clients is still that more gut related. But I found over the years that whenever my body throws anything at me, I just go, well, this is just another learning experience that I can now relate to my clients. When we got married, a few months before we got married, I had Campylobacter, which is a gut bacteria that comes from chickens. And I was extremely sick. I was freaking out that my gut was relapsing. There was a slight part of my brain that was freaking out that my gut was relapsing, even though I knew that it was not, because I was having fevers and hot sweats, and I knew that there was a viral thing going on. But there was still like oh my God. And I remember having a conversation with my mum, and she's like, well, what have you eaten that, have you eaten something that has gluten in it? And I remember saying to her, there was barbecue shapes in the cupboard that my in-laws had brought over for my husband. And shapes is the one thing that he was never allowed to have in the cupboard, unless it was like the ones that I didn't like. And like, now it doesn't bother me, but back then, and I was like, no, Mum, there's a packet of barbecue shapes, but if I wanted to do this to myself,
what do you mean?
And it turned out I had Campylobacter, and I was so sick. And when I saw my doctor, I had an integrated doctor. He was also a herbalist up in Townsville.
Yep.
And it was the very first time that I had seen him, and he goes, he was from Italy, and he goes, you are a very sick young girl right now. I know.
I love that too. I love that doctors can see that you're very sick when you go to them when you're very sick. Yeah.
Well, what had happened was I had this appointment with Carlo that I had, like, he was a 4-week wait to get into, and I had this appointment, and I got sick, and I had gone and just seen a Medicare doctor and literally begged them to do a stool test, and he didn't want it. He's like, oh, it's just gastro, blah 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 blah. And so I started crying. I just need a stool test. And he ended up giving it to me, but he was like, unless you still have symptoms in a couple of days' time, then I don't want you to do it. I'm like, okay. I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and so where it says to write a copy, I put a copy to go to Parlo because I was seeing him on the Thursday. Luckily. But I ended up with, after the Campylobacter got resolved, I ended up with the most horrific brain fog symptoms for 12 months, and like,
oh wow,
almost like dyslexic like symptoms. Like, it was so intense. I remember when we moved down here to Brisbane and we were looking for houses to live in, and my husband was like, oh, what number house was it? And I was like, oh, 274 or something, and it was like house number 36.
Oh wow.
But my brain and my mouth could not communicate properly. And I was like, oh, there it is, 274. And he's like, Liz, that says 36. I said, yeah, that's what I said. Like, I thought I had said 36, but it was, I didn't.
Is that from the bacteria, Elissa? Is that?
Yeah, so because it was so prolonged in my body, so this particular bacteria, if it's not treated quickly enough, you can even end up with brain effects like what I had.
Yeah.
You can even end up with like partial paralysis. It's quite extreme.
Yeah.
So I ended up with this brain fog and this dyslexic like symptoms until once I realized what was happening, then I really sort of smashed healing my gut, like really focused on healing my gut back up again. But it took me 12 months to get over it.
Yeah.
And I remember I had like a couple of assignments left to do, and I had to get Ethan to read through all of them because I kept making spelling mistakes.
Right.
And and I remember when we did move into the house, I was putting in repair requests, and I remember looking back afterwards, and on every subject line, and even where I've saved the photos, I've written repair question.
Oh wow.
And my eyes read repair request.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until I sent them all and I had CC'd Ethan in it, and he called me and he's like,
he's probably thinking, who's this psycho woman I just married? Hey, so can we get back to that bacteria? Like, so where does that come from? Like,
so it comes from chicken. So it usually from either raw chicken meat. So like 1 drop of raw chicken meat juice.
Oh wow.
Just on the edge of your lip can give it to you.
Oh,
you can also get it from handling chicken eggs. So we had chickens.
Yep.
And so I'm assuming that I got it from handling the chicken eggs. I actually had it again last year.
Wow.
And I knew straight away. I woke up in the middle of the night with the stomach cramps. And it just so happened that my bowels had been a little bit funny. And I had asked my GP, I've got a really good GP down here, and I'd asked her just to have a stool test, just because we're on tank water, just to make sure that like there was nothing that was coming through with having been on tank water and stuff like that. But I hadn't got around to doing it. I'd had this referral for the stool test for like literally over a month, and I hadn't done it. And then I woke up this one night with the cramps, the clamminess, and the diarrhea. And it gets to a point that it's like you're literally just passing bile. It's just all yellow. You're just passing bile because everything, nothing sits in you. And so I knew straight away that I had Campylobacter. So I immediately did the stool test, took it in. I did the blood test that I had to do because she was also testing like my inflammatory markers as well. And I got a text message from her to say that you're positive for Campylobacter, and my CRP, which is one of the inflammatory markers, was very high. And so to just make an appointment when I could. She didn't know that I had like infectious Campylobacter though. So I was just lucky because she also takes a long time to get into. My mum had an appointment with her like the next day, so I took the appointment. So because you need to, because I didn't want to get to the point that I was last time, especially with the brain stuff. So I wanted to get on the antibiotics for it straight away, so then I could then repair myself straight away. You can repair it through herbs, but it does take longer. But because of the type of bacteria it is, I was like, I'll just do the antibiotics. So yeah, it is quite, it's very similar to salmonella. So I actually had Campylobacter this time, infectious Campylobacter, and then a month later I went back to her, and it was about 2 days before the infectious Campylobacter started. I started getting arthritic pain in my fingers, and I had started getting that pain again. So she thought, well, let's just retest my stools and just make sure that we got all the Campylobacter. And it came back with salmonella.
Oh, wow.
So I had non-infectious salmonella then sitting there after we got rid of the Campylobacter, which was interesting. So I actually did a GI mapping test, and it showed that I had really high levels of the bacteria Prevotella in my gut, which is actually a bacteria that is present in people who suffer from rheumatoid arthritis.
Right.
So when you have that in high levels in the gut, you can get those mimicking symptoms, which is what I was getting, of the rheumatoid arthritic pain in my fingers, because all the rheumatoid factor and all the other tests to test for autoimmune diseases were coming back normal. But it was because that Prevotella was extremely high.
And that just goes to show what depth this bacteria can be in your gut, how it can affect all parts of the body. And like you talk about the brain fog, you know, people could go to the doctor, they could say, well, you know, doctors tend to prescribe antidepressants for everything, you know, so, and it doesn't really get you anywhere, because it just makes, like we know, your gut line, it just creates more problems there anyway. And you just get, you know, it's all symptomatic that the doctors tend to address rather than the root cause. So when you said the mapping of the GI tract, can you just, I mean, I have an idea of what that is, but can you just explain that a little bit to the viewers and listeners, please? What you meant by that?
So the GI mapping test is basically a more in-depth stool test. So it's done through the functional pathology labs. I was just lucky enough that one of the practitioner supplement companies, I won a GI mapping test, free GI mapping test through a competition.
And that's how you get them, viewers. You have to win them.
That's how you get them. So I did have to pay for it, which is nice, but I just hadn't got around to doing it.
I would pay for anything if it got to the root cause of why I was so sick.
Absolutely. And honestly, if I didn't have that one sitting there, I would have gone and done it anyway. So basically, it's a very in-depth stool test, and it tests for pathogenic bacterias, dysbiotic bacteria. So especially like those sort of, you know, how good and bad bacteria in the gut, that as in general. So dysbiotic meaning like the bacteria that can contribute to things like small bacterial overgrowth that sit in that small intestine and cause all those gassy type issues. Those ones all come up in the GI mapping test as well. It also shows the levels of the good bacteria, and based on those levels of the good bacteria, we can also see how present or not present leaky gut is. So that hyperpermeability of the gut. So if things like Akkermansia is really high, then you can tell just by seeing that the Akkermansia is high that there's obviously that hyperpermeability of the gut, so that leaky gut type presence happening. And then it also tests those like autoimmune trigger bacteria as well. It tests parasites, it tests for worms. It also tests for the secretory IgA, which is also another marker for like inflammation in the gut and showing that sort of permeability. And it also tests the gliadin antibody, which is what they test, one of the tests for celiac disease as well. So yeah, it's a very, very in-depth test. It's worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, which is what, when you were explaining all that, that's obviously what I had, you know, many, many years ago, because a lot of those descriptions I remember being on a test that I had. So getting back to you now, so when somebody comes to see you, would they have gone through the testing with their GP first and then to you, or do some people just come to you with their gut problems and you can assist them in that way?
Most people end up coming to me once they're fed up with their GP.
Yeah. Good answer. I love that answer.
I'm being completely honest. Yeah.
We're completely honest in this show. There's no bullshit on this show. I can tell you that now.
Yeah.
So
once they've sort of gone through all their conventional medicine resources, that's when people tend to. I do have the odd client that comes to me as a first resort instead, which is, you know, which is brilliant. But yeah, majority of people, once they get to the point where, you know, conventional medicine hasn't been able to help them, then that's when they go down that natural path.
And there's a lot of IBS. Well, I don't know, IBS, Crohn's, celiac. There's so much in our society today. I tend to think of the high stress, I guess, that people take on, and also like you were saying, that does upset our guts first. You know, that's one thing, but also the quality of food and, you know, what people perceive as really good nutrition. Like, I'm eating very well, but realistically they're not, because we all have been taught a certain way of eating. So Elissa is also a qualified nutritionist, aren't you, Elissa? So if you actually want to know how to eat properly, I'm hoping Elissa would be able to tell you that.
Yes, definitely. Do you know, one of my favorite documentaries is that sugar film. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yes.
Yeah. That's because it's brilliant. Just it's such a no bullshit. This is literally like, and he shows that he's eating a diet that people have been made to think through the marketing techniques. So my business degree is in marketing, marketing and management. And it literally is so clever, these companies, and with the, you know, the heart ticket approval and all that kind of stuff, to make us think to eat a certain way. When, like, the reality literally is that if we did eat whole foods, you know, fruit, vegetables, animal proteins, less packaged food, obviously we're going to be healthier, but it does cost less money. We do eat more of them because they're less calorie dense, but it does actually cost less money too, because packaged food is so expensive when you really think about it. Yeah.
And I also say, like, I have a friend who runs health retreats in Bali, and the food is, you know, the whole foods, like everything's made by hand, like nut milks and everything's made. And I had to tell, like, we were having like breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, whatever, because it was all, we paid for all our meals while we were there. And I literally had to say to her, can you just stop one meal, please? Because the meals are just a normal sort of size meal, but because they are the whole foods, plant-based foods. Well, I'd say plant-based lightly, because some plant-based stuff's shit, but whole foods, and they're so nutrient dense that they actually fill you up. And the you know, and it doesn't matter how much of them you eat, you don't put on weight. And weight's not a thing for me about, you know, eating properly. It's got nothing to do with losing weight, putting on weight and so forth in a regard, but it's you just feel so much better eating that way. And we're just so addicted to all the salt and sugar in processed foods that we can't seem to get away from it. But I know myself and my journey that once I started putting more whole foods into my diet and less of some of the processed stuff, like I can't even bring myself around to eating half the stuff I used to eat before. And if I do, I go, oh yeah, I'll try that, or oh yeah, I'll have that. I used to love that, and I eat it, and I'm like, yuck.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't.
It's revolting. Why did I like this?
Yeah, I know. Like the old, I think I did it many, many years ago, because as a child I used to have cornflakes with, I don't eat cereal, by the way. If anyone wants to know what I do eat, well, one thing I don't eat is cereal. I used to have a bowl of cornflakes with cold milk and sugar on top. And one day, just for fun, many years ago, I went, oh, I used to really love that. And I set it all up, and I'm like, oh my God, I had to tip it out.
I used to do the same, except without the milk, because I always liked my cereal without, like, crunching. Yeah, but I used to put the sugar on it, and I noticed, like, because my parents live with us as well, and my dad still puts the sugar on it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I had some of the gluten-free cornflakes the other week, and I was like, gosh, they are sweet.
Yeah. Yes. And I know people are lactose intolerant, but lactose-free milk to me is so sweet. It's just disgusting.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, I love your story. Thank you for sharing the story. If anybody has any IBS issues, and this is a person to see. She's at is it Flagstone?
Yeah, I'm in Flagstone, but I also treat people online as well.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah.
And I've got all of Elissa's contacts where you can find her and everything. I'll put it all in the show notes. Anything else you care to share before we go?
I think I could talk all day, to be honest.
I think you could too. You're my longest podcast guest. But I so love that. I love your energy. So
Thank you.
I want to say, stay on after I say goodbye, won't you?
Yeah.
So I would love to thank you so much for being on, Elissa, and all the best with your little twins.
Thank you.
One day when I'm back home in Brisbane, I can come and check them out.
Yes.
Thank you for being a guest and sharing your story. And people, if you want to sort out your IBS and other things that you've got going on, your gut, leaky gut, whatever it is, get onto Elissa, because she's gorgeous. I have met her in real life.
Yeah.
And as you can see, she's got a high energy, even though she's carrying twins. So you'll see all her info in the show notes. Thanks, Elissa.
Thank you.
See you later. Bye.
See ya. Bye.